So welcome everyone to Empowering Women with Tech. I'm Natasha Sosalem. I am the founder of Empowering Women with Tech. And I'm very, very proud to have people like Claire Duffield, who helps steer our amazing ship on board, and all of the wonderful allies and supporters who've joined us. I am so incredibly excited about this event. It's a topic that is so close to my heart, and for people who might have dialed in a bit earlier, fingers crossed you might have heard me kind of gassing away with Olu on kind of my thoughts on this stuff when it's really important to me. I've kind of reiterated it a few times, so apologies if I'm repeating myself for those who came earlier. We will be finishing for a short break at about 5 to 8. I'm usually pretty good at spotting when we're getting to 5 to 8, but if you see me veering off and not noticing, feel free to just pop onto the chat window, Nat, you know, get with the plan. And what we will do is we will take a 10-minute break to go and clap for our wonderful frontline staff and allow you to fill up your drinks and take a break, a comfort break if you need to. We have our hashtag for today's event, which is Empower with Tech. So if you want to tweet some love, so please use Empower with Tech. And without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our wonderful speaker, Olu from the BBC. So Olu, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at the BBC?
Okay, so hi, I'm Olu. I'm a developer in BBC News. I do have a slide about this, but also, so sorry if I repeat myself in a bit. But yeah, I am a web developer in the BBC News team working on international news, so world service is what we call it. So we're currently deplatforming internal servers to move on to AWS and getting off like our own servers. So we need to build a new way to deploy and render our stuff. So that's what I do at the BBC.
Brilliant. Well, so without further ado, we're very excited to have you here. So without further ado, tell us about why you think the internet is broken, web accessibility, social justice and inclusion.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, this is my talk. I apologise in advance if any of this is a bit janky because I reorganised the slides, as you may have seen if you follow my Twitter. So yeah, this will be an interesting voyage for both of us. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so hi, I'm Olu. As you've heard, I'm at the BBC. I'm non-binary, I use they, them pronouns. Sorry if I'm looking down as well, I'm looking at my speaker notes, which are on my phone. Yeah, I'm a front-end dev for the most part, and I have a great interest in accessibility, which is why I'm doing this talk, also in social justice and also in inclusion. So yes, all very interesting to me. And web accessibility at BBC is very enshrined in the culture, which is really helpful to me as a person because I've learned so much about it working there. It's interesting to have it like as part of our working techniques, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really enjoy working there at the moment. And yeah, I feel like tweeting me, my handle was at the bottom throughout the whole thing, so feel free to follow me and I'll probably follow you back. So yes, the internet. You're probably wondering like, well, the internet is not broken and the internet is not a box in this way. So yes, I don't know, like maybe you came into this talk and you're wondering like, why is the internet broken? Why do you feel like this is a thing that needs to be spoke about? Well, the internet is powerful. And I don't know if you've watched this film. This is quite an old Spider-Man film, like several generations of Spider-Man before now. But yeah, like if you have a phone, like I think this quote is so important because it's like you have so much power now. You have so much information ready for you. You have so much access. You can talk to someone on the other side of the world in a minute. Like you have so much power, but not everyone has this. So as people who work on the internet, we have great responsibility. So this is the original quote where the with great power comes great responsibility thing comes from. It's from the comic. And yeah, so you have to remember that you have a lot of power in the world as a tech worker, and you shouldn't forget that. So yeah, around the world, about 40% of people in the world, they can't access the internet at all. So this is going down gradually. Last time I gave this talk, it was over 51%, I think, or around 50%. So it's slowly going down. But still, that's a lot of people in the world who have no access to any of the splendors of the internet. They can't go on Twitter, they can't look up something on Wikipedia, they can't send an email. They just have no access at all. They might have a phone, but they probably won't have the internet. And more than 1 billion of these people live in Southern Asia, and lots of them live in Africa as well, as you would imagine. And yeah, I can post these slides as well in case you want to see where I'm getting these quotes from. I mean, these stats from. 1 in 5 disabled adults in the UK don't use the internet in 2018. I think this has slightly gone down as well, but it's about the same, about a fifth. and that's obviously for many reasons. But yeah, often it's older people as well. So people who didn't grow up with the internet, and so don't feel they have a need to learn, or who just haven't been given access to learn how to use it. And I think a lot of people don't realise that it's so high, I guess, especially amongst disabled adults. So yeah, that's why I wanted to share this stat with you. Oh, is that not working? Oh, cool. So obvious way to fix that is to give up offline options. So, you know, things like banking are moving online, things like there's gov.uk, which is amazing on one hand, but also on the other hand, getting things like benefits or paying council tax now has to be online. So you should probably give, well, not always, depends on your council, but yes, anyway, things like that. The option to vote, always give an option to be offline. If you sell food, you should probably have some kind of way of, I know it sounds more difficult, it's more difficult than making it sound, but you know, as far as possible, give an offline option. And then of course we have the issue of trolls in the internet. So I was going to talk about Diane Abbott, who in the run up to the last general election, she got almost half, which is 45% of all the abusive tweets in the last general election. And these are like terrible, terrible things, like terrible threats, not just like, I think people often think that, well, there are a lot of women in this audience, so I assume you know that it's not just a fun, horrible comment they're making, it's like something quite serious, is usually what these are. And excluding her, black and Asian women MPs got most of the abusive tweets, but at 35%. And the abuse directed at Diane Abbott herself was 10 times more as much as received by any other female MP, according to an Amnesty study. So yeah, it's to be different on the internet is often like a scary thing to be, I'd say. And MERMAIDS is another victim of trolling. They're a charity that helps transgender children, and they help support their parents and the children themselves in transitioning and any other things they need. And the CEO, who is herself a parent of a transgender child, she was targeted with abuse and threats. She had to block up to 20 Twitter accounts a day on Twitter for all the threatening comments that she was receiving. And yeah, so that's another example of like the fearfulness of being like different and visibly different on the internet. And another problem is that LGBT content is often filtered. I don't know if people know this, but like there's been a lot of stuff recently with YouTube that they were, I'm not sure if they still are, because it's been back and forth, but they were filtering any, like, if you search lesbian or gay, it wouldn't come up with like people's stuff because they thought it was like sexualized content, if I can speak. And yeah, so that was very difficult for a lot of the LGBT YouTubers, and they often get demonetized, very restricted as well, and sometimes even removed on YouTube. And in schools, I don't know if I assume most of us haven't been in school for a while, but definitely they often filter, like, again, the same sort of keywords because they're scared it'll be a sexual comment, but it can be, especially for people in homes where being LGBT isn't accepted, it can be really important to be able to access services such as like the Terence Higgins Trust and stuff like that, like just things that people can get help from. So it's not always sexualized, it's just stuff, information that people need to live. So yeah. That'll work. Okay. And as you may know, there's more male internet users than women in the world. Like I was going to show a graph, but it was kind of confusing as it was even in some places and very yeah, it's like getting off topic to show you that graph, but I can send it later if anyone's interested. But yeah, so amongst people who don't use the internet at all, it's declining, but 58% of them are women in 2018. And in digital skills, and by digital skills I mean the ability to use the internet at all, like for sending an email, searching for something like on Amazon or any of the other like shopping sites, what else? Being able to look at media online, being able to use a word like online apps, like things like that. Some people have no skills, and women are more likely to be that kind of person. So yeah. And Wikipedia is another source of information online, and over 80% of people on there are men. And I don't know if you've heard of this as well, but there was a Nobel Prize winner called Donna Strickland, and the year I think about a year before she got her Nobel Prize, they told her that her page was deemed not important enough to be on Wikipedia. So it just shows you that the bias can really show through sometimes, and you can miss a lot of vital information because people who are men or also who are overwhelmingly white end up being the ones who are updating and maintaining these pages. So like the vast majority of content written about Africa is written by Europeans and Americans. And there's like loads and loads and loads of articles in Dutch, which has 2 million speakers, and only 70k articles compared to 2 million. There's 2 million speakers, 28 million speakers of Dutch, and there are 2 million articles. There are 70k articles in Bengali, and there are 280 million speakers. So you can see the disparity there. At least there were in 2018 again. So yeah. And so that's not the solution to the problem, but one of the ways you can get around this is to listen to, hire, and collaborate with marginalised people. So as far as possible, sorry, let me take a small drink. As far as possible, try and include marginalised people in all of these decisions. Try and include them when you are making your product, when you are creating your materials, when you are hiring, when you are finding people to test with. Include marginalised people as much as possible. Time. Okay, cool. And yeah, center the voice of the most marginalised. So people who are disabled and or also women and are also Black and are also trans. Like these are all things that you should center in your as much as possible. Like I know sometimes you say, oh, my product isn't targeting people, then fine. But even within your niche, there are people who are disabled, there are people who are different from the norm. So try and center them. And cool. So I can't hear any audience participation, which I did have at Afrotech Fest, but yeah. Can you guess what Beyonce and Dominoes Pizza have in common? Probably not, I would assume.
Can anyone in the chat window? Can anyone guess what has Beyonce and Dominoes Pizza got in common?
I can't see the chat window, which sadly, but yeah, you can tell me if anyone guesses it.
Nobody has got a guess yet. Sued for failing accessibility.
Oh, well done!
Yeah, inaccessible websites, 3 people, Helen Joy, Carolina Gilbert, and the lovely Claire Davidson.
Yeah, well done. You get points there. They're both getting sued, so yeah. Yeah, they are both getting sued under the American Disability Act for not having an accessible website because Beyonce's case, I think, is still ongoing, but Domino's both were sued and appealed their suing when it would have been cheaper for them to just fix the website. So often, if you want to escape these problems and just build it right in the first place, it's difficult. I know it's expensive, yes, but it's less expensive than fighting in court. So try and also you have moral obligation, I would say. So yeah, and the things that were wrong with their sites is both like being unable to order. So don't you want the money of these people? I don't. Yeah, to me it makes no sense, but yeah, that's the issue of both of them. And what time is it? 7:50. Okay. And yeah, banks are another one, like similar on the other side of the coin, I said, even though it's the same side, but yeah, it's trying to be funny. But yes, HSBC, Metro Bank, and HSBC, can I speak? Made it hard for blind and visually impaired users to use their sites. And when HSBC was told that they made it hard for a blind user, they said they'll send them a video. So that was very helpful. And this is in the UK, of course, so people can sue them. And I assume we're going to see more of this as time goes on. And it's stealing, like, to not be able to use your own money is, yes, can you even imagine? For most of us, I assume we can't, so yeah. And yeah, so moving on to disability and specifically, blah. So yeah, this is a really cool quote from a disability activist and designer, I think designer, well, she works in tech anyway. People with disabilities are original life hackers because our motivation is so high. If we don't hack, we often go without. And yeah, it's true. Like there's, I think I've got it on the next slide. Yeah. 97% of the top million websites had WCAG, Web Content Accessibility guidelines, so WCAG is how people used to say it. So WCAG 2, which is the newest iteration of it. And if you don't know what that means that the WCAG is a set of guidelines that make sites accessible. So 97% of all of the websites that you possibly have ever used probably have these errors. And the errors are things like low contrast, which means that people who have, say, color blindness can't really see, or people who have low vision. missing alternative text, which again means that screen reader users can't access or will have lack of context for things. Empty links, which means that people who are using screen readers again don't know what they're clicking on when they click on it. Missing form labels, which means they can't complete a form. Missing document language, which confuses screen readers as well. And empty buttons, which again means you're clicking on something but you're not sure completely what it is. And those are the most common ones. So they're all quite low-hanging fruit if you have any familiarity with accessibility guidelines. But this is like the picture of the world at the moment. I think it may have gone down or up slightly since since I last did this. But yeah, I think it's quite scary to think that people are trying their best and they have to have access to accessibility software in the first place it's definitely a barrier because people don't always have the money. Like there's Jaws, which is a non-free screen reader, one of the most popular ones, and that can cost up to I think £700 at the when I last checked for a professional version. So you have the thing that you need to search the internet in theory, but then the internet isn't ready for you to be there, and that's one way it's broken. What time is it? 4 minutes. And compounding factors make this so much worse. So on the internet, there are so many, as I said before, there's so many benefits to being able to use the internet. You can get increased earnings. You're more likely employed if you can use the internet. You find things for up to 30% cheaper online by being able to compare and contrast different places. You can communicate more and up to 40% more people, and you save time. And in 2016, it was estimated in the next 10 to 20 years that 90% of jobs will require some sort of digital skills. So imagine you're one of that 58% of women who, you're part of the people who don't use the internet, and you're a woman, and you're disabled, and then you have to look for a job. It's going to be very difficult in how many years now? 16 years, according to this. But I would say now it's pretty quite difficult, to be honest. Lots of places they want you to apply online, so it's very difficult.
And I think it's a really interesting question that you make. I'm going to seal off, give a gentle break before our clap. That awesome. Lots of companies now, you can only apply online. And of course, that's the case, right? Because we want to digitize things, we want to simplify the process. But by doing that, we're potentially excluding great people who have no access to the internet, or they are potentially internet savvy, or they have digital skills, but they potentially can't afford broadband. Exactly. And it's a really interesting statement when you say compounding factors make things worse. And I think going into our clap break, there is already so much food for thought. I loved the quote that your Lucy Jackson quote about the fact that people with disabilities are almost having to hack their way to make things work, and that's a really sobering thing. And as Clyde Davidson, who's on here, who knows from Sky, one of the most sobering things, and I first had it at the BBC where Olu works, is actually getting somebody with disabilities to use a product or a service that we built before we shipped it live. And when it didn't work, and when you actually saw this poor person suffering, and luckily they were testing it, so it wasn't launched. It is the worst feeling in the world, where you feel this big because you can watch that something you've genuinely tried to make, well, doesn't actually serve some of the most marginalised in society. And ever since I did that experience, I would wholeheartedly recommend you all to do the same, as get great accessibility consultants in to test your products and services, and then we'll show you with Jaws and with other software where the problems are, so that you don't marginalise people. And if you don't have budgets for consultants, there's a wealth of knowledge online, or go to an incredible accessibility meetup. I mean, in Leeds, we're incredibly lucky to have accessibility leads, which I'm going to whoop again, because they are wonderful. And many other cities don't have, so many other cities have them as well. And if they don't have them, then stuff it, set one up yourself, and see if you have some other people in the community, or get in touch with local companies and local charities as well, because you'll have we've had lots of support from charities like RNIB, so the Royal National Institution for Blind. Forgive me if I've got that wrong, but don't be afraid to ask for help, because there'll be loads of people willing to help you in this situation. So it feels like a lovely time to break now. So what we're going to do, everybody, is I make it 5 to 8 even. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be back at 8:05. So it gives us some time to go and clap for our wonderful frontline staff, and then for you all to replenish your glasses. I need to do mine. And to have a comfort break or whatever you want to do, and we'll kick off again at 8:05 with the rest of Olu's brilliant talk. Thank you, everyone. Right, welcome back, everyone. I hope that everyone got a bit of fresh air. We had bangings of pans here. There's a lovely chorus of things and cars driving past tooting. So it's such a lovely sense of camaraderie with the club. So it's ace that it's still continuing. So we left just before the break with Olu making a really valuable point about compounding factors make things worse, and some of the stuff that we kind of talked, that Olu talked about previously. So back over to you.
Awesome. So on Tasha's point about about money, if you have a higher income, so over 40%, £40,000 a year, you're 47% more likely to have full basic digital skills. So the skills I was saying about, like being able to send an email and such, so and such, it does definitely increase with the more money you have, which makes sense. So yeah, sadly. And trying to think what other stats I have on here that are pertinent right now. Yeah, 12% of those between age between 11 and 18 have no internet access from a computer or tablet, and a further 60,000 have no home internet access at all. So imagine you can only go on your phone, or a tablet to, only your phone to use the internet, and you have to do your homework. It's not an easy thing to do.
And I think especially in this current situation right now, where so many children are being homeschooled, and a lot of the provisions are mainly internet based, that again, there is a further marginalisation of society with one of the God-given basics, which is education. And obviously it's not anybody's fault that we're in lockdown right now, but there's some wonderful people like Emma Behrman and Ben McKenna with Solidaritech, who are doing some wonderful things in the Yorkshire and Humber region about trying to get recycle technical kit that still works on mobile phones and laptops to refugee asylum seekers and more marginalised communities, so that they have access to technology right now. But in lockdown, it's even more chronic with children and just access to basic education. But all credit to the BBC, for example, for all the work that they're doing with the bite-sized stuff. But again, a lot of that stuff is only available on the internet.
Yeah, that's really sad. Like I thinking about the whole refugee thing. My housemate is a like, this is not an anecdote that's from the thing, but it's relevant. That often you only have a certain amount of space that you're supposed to like, you're legally allowed. So I can't think of the exact number, but I think it's like 100 square foot to between one adult and 2 children, something like that. And it's like, it's not much room. And also imagine you have to then have people on tablets and devices in class in that space. It's not going to be very, it's not being a good like educational environment, but that's just how life is at the moment for lots of people. And yeah, so back to the stats, like the proportion of adults in poor households who don't go online is double the UK average, so 22% versus 12%, so yeah, almost double, sorry. And yeah, it's decreasing, so people are getting more online and more people have devices and more people have tablets, but it's still, lots of people are still excluded, including disabled people and old people. So yeah, imagine if you live at these intersections, as I think as the next slide says. Maybe, if it works. Okay. Yeah, so if you don't, imagine you live at the intersection of all the issues we discussed so far. So yeah, the internet is a hard place to be if you are different in any way, and especially if you're different in many ways. So yeah. And as Suz Hinton says, humans aren't educators. So it's easy to say, oh, well, it's fine because, only certain people are going to have this issue. It's true that you can't design for every single option and makes things like good for everyone, but you have to be like mindful of that decision. You shouldn't just decide, oh, edge case this, edge case that. No, it's the person you're excluding there. So think about it and make sure you take it to heart what you're doing. Yeah. And so this is getting onto advice now about accessibility, which, so test accessibility software, that is the logo for Chrome Lens. So use stuff like that. Use things like free screen readers like MVDA, which was designed by a blind man, which is really cool. And use screen magnifiers, color inverting software, again, like Chrome Lens. Tab through pages, try navigating without a mouse, try using your keyboard and see what it's like. Does everything work as you expect, basically, in all of these options? Does it work as you expect when you have, like, when you change on Chrome Lens the color profiles and check the contrast and all this other stuff? Like, does it still work as you expect it to? Oh, whoops.
And what we can do is, for those who just weren't familiar with some of the software that Olu just rattled through, Olu is on Twitter, so feel free to follow Olu on Twitter, and she can happily give you links to any of that cool software, because most of it is free, and by its very nature is very accessible to use as well. So it's a really great thing if you are starting to code, or you're an experienced developer wanting to hopefully you've picked up on some of the themes in this and want to give it a go, then that they're all available and really easy to use as well.
Yeah, definitely hit me up if you want links, and I'll link to my what they called slides, that's the word. And yeah, so semantic HTML. So don't reach for a div and there's another element that'll do a job. Don't make a button into a div unless you absolutely have to and you've thought through the implications and you know ARIA and all this other stuff. Like, there's lots of reasons why. Just use the button, style the button, use the button. There's lots of things like that. So use things like, if you're using a class name like a nav or a header or a main, probably use a nav, a header or a main element rather than using divs for everything, as I think everyone does. But yeah, we can fix web, you know, it's possible. And there's automated tooling. So yeah, I've got a link in my notes again, but this is Lighthouse, the first one which looks like a lighthouse, which is in Google Chrome now. So you can run an audit and it will give you errors that it will show you errors that are easy to fix, I guess, or easy to automatically fix. And Axe is another one that you can include in your browser, and then it will run a report, and then it will show you all the issues that are serious, critical, stuff like that. It'll give you different levels of importance. And you can include these in your, I know you can definitely include Lighthouse, I'm not sure about Axe, but you can include it in your builds if you are a coder. And yeah, do user testing. Test the people with disabilities, test people who are different to you, basically, in every way as possible. I know it's expensive sometimes to do this kind of thing, but even testing with a few people is better than no testing at all. Yeah, include accessibility in your planning. So when you create your sprints and your roadmaps, include time for accessibility bugs and improvements in mind. And we do accessibility swarms at the BBC. I'm still not sure if this is a thing in other places, but yeah, we have like a tester, dev, and a product owner at the very least, who will always check, and UXer, sorry, will always check a feature before it goes live, so to make sure it's like good. And sometimes it'll be the whole team that does it. So yeah, I don't know, but multidisciplinary teams are best for this. And yeah, make sure you test all the core assistive technologies, and then you record the bugs, prioritize them, and then you decide which ones are going to be blockers for you going live and which ones are going to be just not nice to have, but you know what I mean, like improvements in future. Didn't work. Okay, cool. Yeah, so don't worry, we can rebuild the web. It's like, I know it's difficult, like there's a lot to take in, but we have the technology, so it'll be fine. And if you're not a developer, don't worry, because there's other things you can do. You can build diverse teams. If you have any input in hiring, make sure you're hiring, like, even if you don't have much input, you can still be the kind of person who says, wait, when I tried to sign up for this job and when I got to the onboarding stage, the forms were terrible. So, you know, someone who's got disability won't be able to use this form, and you can tell them that and they can try and fix it, even if you don't have much weight in the actual hiring process. So there's always something you can do. And yeah, anyone in the workplace can advocate for disabled and marginalised people. So if you see something happening, talk about it. Don't just stay silent. Tell the union. Join the union if you're not in the union, and tell your bosses and your other co-workers about things that they're doing wrong, and yeah, ways that they can improve. And yeah, basic checks, like I said, so tabbing through, screen readers, screen magnifiers, as I've said, yeah. So you don't have to run a full audit, but you can definitely check things even if you're not actually a developer. And captions are your friend. So YouTube captions, Twitter captions, Facebook captions, image captions, Instagram captions, caption anything you can caption. Make sure that other people can enjoy the media that you are enjoying all the time. So, and you can help by making the internet more accessible by helping people who either don't have the opportunity or wouldn't have the access that you have to add information to the internet. So yeah, don't worry, there's always something you can do. And the original title of the talk was Building the Woke Web, as you may have noticed. And I, on a reflection, was like, I shouldn't really use this word because I'm not African American. But either way, I kept this aside because I thought people would find it interesting. That wokeness is not an endpoint. Like wokeism doesn't mean that you are woke or asleep. It's just a start. It's a way of looking at the world. It's just the beginning. So don't think, oh, now that I've had this talk, I know what to do. Don't think that, now that I've gone off and done all this research and stuff, it's the end point. No, that's just journey. It's always going to be continuing. So yeah, accessibility is a process. Inclusive design is the goal is a quote from Derek Featherstone out of Part. So yeah, that sums it up. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have got a couple of questions. So if you have a question for Olu, I have one from the lovely Claire, who asks, how easy was it to build good accessibility techniques into your role as a developer?
Depends on which company you mean. At the BBC, it's very easy because everyone just does it. It's part of our team. Like we have a accessibility person. I don't know her actual role name, but she is like full-time for accessibility person on our team. He moves between different streams, but yeah, she's there. So yeah, at the BBC it's very, very easy, but I do admit at other jobs that I've had, people don't care about it at all, and it's very difficult. But I think that if you have any power within your organisation, you should definitely try and push for it. And yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult in some places, I admit. And
if you've got any other questions, please feel free to ping them over. Nicola Bell says, thank you. Georgie says, thank you, Olu. Jessica says, thank you, really fantastic presentation. Claire says, that was fantastic. Thank you, Olu. Mary, thank you, very interested. Looking forward to using some of the tools mentioned. Brilliant, thank you. Love the stats, so useful. Sandy Forrester, that was great. Thank you, Olu. I think, and Carolina says, thank you, Olu.
Awesome.
What I've done is I've posted into the chat window Lighthouse, very stealthily. And the second thing is the do's and don'ts for accessibility. So I don't know if people have seen these posters before. I'm going to see if I can.
Oh, the gov.uk ones.
Yeah.
No, those are awesome.
So forgive me because I've never tried to do this. So can people
awesome.
see my screen? Can everyone see that my screen? I'm going to have to hope that you can, and that you're not seeing like some dodgy shopping website for me or something like that.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, fabulous. If you get a chance, these posters are tremendous. And what is brilliant, and when I shared this with some of my team, thank you, Tanya, wonderful Tanya, sending much love to you from afar. What's brilliant about these posters is that they address wider things around anxiety, things which you wouldn't have maybe traditionally associated with accessibility, but it makes you think. So the do's and don'ts for people on the autism spectrum, screen readers, low vision, dyslexia, deaf or hard of hearing, physical or motor disabilities. But like I say, anxiety is one of them as well that is kind of covered off. So the link is in the chat window. They're wonderful to print off and put around your offices or send to your teams, obviously with lockdown as well. But it's just a really useful tool for kind of just checking that you know, we're getting it right, if that makes sense. So, oh Christ. Now I don't know how I'm going to get back to seeing everyone.
Probably just stop your share.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to do that. Whilst we're doing that, I'm going to just try and see if I can find if there is any other questions. Stop share. Oh, brilliant. Hurrah, I'm back. So Tanya, don't be embarrassed. So Tanya has a wonderful question saying, I'm a bit embarrassed about asking this, but I'm about to build a website using WordPress. Are there any accessibility tips? Should I consider for using that? It's a brilliant question.
Yeah, like I don't know much about WordPress, but I would assume if you're using it in the way that means that you're using lots of plugins, there are probably people who are commenting online about whether or not the things that you're using are accessible or not accessible. Because like to be negative, like Duolingo is a big website where it's not very accessible, and if you just Google Duolingo accessibility, lots of people are coming up commenting to them saying that this is not accessible. So people do complain. So don't worry. I think I think most of WordPress stuff is probably quite good for that, I would assume, but maybe don't quote me because I have not used much WordPress, but yeah. I think the same tools that I mentioned would help, so yeah.
Yeah, and even Amy's just shouted to say, yeah, great question as well, brilliant. So Harriet says, could you say something about not being able to please everyone and how you go on about deciding on who to focus on?
At the BBC, it often ends up being about stats. So we know our users from collecting information, and then we decide, so this is going to expect a very small number of users, and so we have decided that these are the tech people support, these are people's needs that we support, and these are the browsers we support. And so we try to support those very well, and then the rest it's nice to have, but it's not essential. And also, depending on what your product is, maybe you know that you have people who you definitely want to support, but other people who you don't, and yeah. And looking at browser stats is one of the easiest ways, I'd say. Like these kind of browsers, these kind of tech, these are the ones I want to support, and what's actually used are people who have the needs that you think you might want to cater to. Yeah, that stuff like that.
Brilliant. So the lovely Pam Money, my favourite name of the evening. Welcome, Pam. So Pam says, are there any good companies' websites who have who are best practices for having great accessible websites?
Gov.uk. Going to say BBC News because I have to, but it's true also. BBC News is very good. I'm trying to think of others. It's hard. Not off the top of my head. I'd have to have a look for you. But there are quite a lot. Anything that's quite simple HTML as well. So yeah.
We'll open this up to the chat window as well. So if you have some other accessible websites that you would recommend for people to check out, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. I don't know if Claire, Verity says the Financial Times.
Oh, cool.
Under a paywall, we should be supporting our journalists. Financial Times, Verity reckons to hit up as well, but gov.uk is absolutely tremendous. Leanne has posted something cryptic, so let's see if I can figure out what that means. I don't know what that means. So an anonymous attendee says, hello, anonymous attendee. How can we ensure the COVID app is as accessible as possible?
It's a very good question. Yeah. I actually haven't used it because I just haven't left the house in like nearly 2 months now. Apart from to go to like the corner shop, so I don't think I'm fully a vector. So, but either way, I think that testing is probably the most important thing. I'm not sure how it's being tested at the moment, or if it's being tested at all, to be honest. But it's just making sure that users who we worry are going to be the ones who, well, people who will definitely need to use it are the ones who are being targeted. If that makes sense. So people who work on the front line, people who are most vulnerable, are the ones who are we testing with, is what I would say.
Yeah, we've got a great question from Jenan, who says, and this is actually a really useful question because it's something I've thought about as well. As somebody who's been in the tech industry for a while, I learned a lot of my stuff as people who joined in earlier at the BBC, where I worked nearly 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And whilst I do try and obviously keep in the loop with kind of major improvements, it's hard to, and it's almost this, I already know the principles and I'm very dedicated to it. So Jen's question is, has there been any big changes in accessibility standards recently, or is it mainly a case of getting the foundations right?
I definitely say foundations, because I think that there are changes all the time, basically. But once you get into the habit of always checking like the guidelines, or checking like people's standards or blogs even of people who are in accessibility, then you'll be notified of all the updates. Sometimes it's impossible to do everything that is like would be good, if that makes sense. But it's good to have even like I said, the 5 things that I mentioned that were huge errors and common errors even in all those websites. Then yeah, try and target that. Like, you can get to the more nitty-gritty stuff when you get to it, but I think at the beginning it's fine to just stick to the basics.
Absolutely. And Mary makes a really valuable point. She says that coronavirus content is free on the Financial Times at the moment. So it's, again, probably a really good time to check out some of the features on the FT as well. So Hannah has a wonderful question saying, any thoughts on accessibility needs for speakers of other languages?
Oh, cool. Yes. I think it's very difficult because, yes, we work on international sites at the BBC. One of the main things is just making sure your HTML has the correct language on it so that the screen reader can understand that it's not English that it's speaking, if that makes sense. But I'm trying to think of those other things that we had to consider. Making sure people can have the date and stuff in their own like language and place. Like lots of internationalization stuff will help with screen readers. And lots of text legibility stuff will help with Zoom and not Zoom, sorry, that's confusing. Screen magnifiers and stuff like that. So I think lots of the principles you take into other areas of accessibility and inclusion would help with other languages. But yeah, not my concentration there. So yeah.
And Nicola makes a lovely point to say that I found the Wave audit tool very useful for highlighting any WCAG issues and how to fix them. So that's great.
Cool.
Great stuff, Nicola. You are most welcome. So Jenna asks a follow-up question. So what do you find most difficult about getting accessibility right at the BBC? I mean, as somebody who worked at the BBC, the BBC cares a lot about accessibility because ultimately, you know, people are license fee payers. So you can't be selective. You have to make sure that you offer a fair service to everyone because they're license fee payers. So what is, and I know how I would answer this question, but it'd be really interesting to, from your perspective, Olu, and what you found most difficult about getting accessibility right in BBC News.
I think the most difficult thing is people thinking often that, well, not often, sometimes being like, oh, we have to do this now, if that makes sense. And that's the same with all teams. It's not just BBC. Like, people are just like, they understand it's important, but often sometimes people just, want to finish and ship the thing. So it's like, oh, we have more bugs to fix now and more to do. It's been much better on my current team, but yeah, I think that's often the issue.
Absolutely. And I think it's always that compromise. Some of the recommendations that our accessibility consultants at the BBC would give would almost take the design so far away from the original design that there'd always have to be compromises. And I think that's the key with accessibility, is compromise, finding a solution that hopefully works for all. And that's why getting accessibility as early into the process as possible is crucial. So it isn't an after, I think that some companies, it's kind of, you know, you do your design and then you do your development, then you do your testing, then you get the accessibility person in who's just like, what have you done? Why have you done this? And by this point, you've got a product owner going, come on, we need to get this thing out, you know, time is money. And this poor accessibility consultant kind of going, well, you know, it's ridiculous. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I would suggest is that you bring accessibility as early into the process, right to the beginning of the process as possible, so that accessibility is considered through the design stage, through to the development stage. So as Olu mentioned about the semantic markup, that these are things that are ingrained from the beginning, and then you have a success, and then it isn't hated or this sort of annoying thing that comes along and is a killjoy. It becomes part of your culture, the same way that agile is part of your culture, or collaboration or innovation is part of your culture. Accessibility should be there right from the get-go. And as Olu said, having people who are champions for it going, right, no, we need to be thinking about these things now, is the step change that we need to making things better for us all, right?
Yeah.
So Harriet asks, how does the choice and structure of content contribute to having an accessible website?
That's an interesting question. Choice and structure, like, do you mean, that I can't really ask a clarification question, can I? So
Harriet's here, so Harriet can see if I can. Oh no, I can't do anything clever, sorry.
It's all right.
Harriet, I don't know, Harriet, if you have a microphone, if you can speak, you should be able to speak to us right now.
Okay, well, I'm speaking. Is that working?
It is.
Yes.
Hello, Harriet.
Right. Cool. Yeah, so I think, you know, there's sort of the stuff that you've been talking about, Ollie, but then I'm thinking also about the actual content, and the way that content is organized can, you know, how is that going to contribute to an inclusive experience or not?
Do you mean like video or text or etc.?
Yeah,
Like,
or even just down to choice of language, or the quantity of information, or the sort of, you know, the tone of voice that it's delivered in, all of those things.
right, yeah, that's all very important. Like, I didn't cover it because I was trying to keep things brief, if that makes sense. But the gov.uk, they have people who are very into the content and how it should be delivered. So they're a very good site to look into for guidance on how to make things clear and concise, and good for people who have like dyslexia or cognitive disabilities who need more clearer stuff. But it makes it better for everyone because it's better not to have too much information or information portrayed in a strange way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it is very important. Yeah, you're right.
And I think it is also with dyslexia, it's a key thing of making sure that text is broken down into passages as well. So again, on the accessibility, the gov.uk sheets, there's some really great recommendations around that. And Helen Joy says that Hemingway is also great for testing the readability of content, and that's hemingwayapp.com. If some of you want to give that a go. But the BBC was tremendous for that, for really making sure that text was laid out into structures, and also the importance of semantic markup in this as well. So having only one H1 tag, you know, kind of properly structuring, you know, the markup makes a huge difference as well to the readability of the content. And one of the things which is really important on this stuff, if you ever need buy-in for businesses, is that Google is starting to penalise websites that aren't very accessible and aren't very performant. And so it will have an impact on your bottom line, because your web pages will not rank as well on Google if they are not, you know, well-built, accessible, performant websites. So accessibility is key, and it always has been for good SEO. If you have a really great accessible website, you will do awesome on SEO. And performance is also a key thing. And performance, again, impacts marginalised groups, because they might be on slower devices, on older tech, and they might be potentially on dongles where they are paying for, let's say, a gig of broadband, and they're not on limited packages. So again, performance is a huge thing for making sure that people can enjoy content as well.
Yeah, all very important points. Yeah.
Can't see the accessibility link. Tanya, do you mean the posters, or do you mean the Lighthouse link? The posters. Posters. Yeah. Okay. I am on it, Tanya. So I think if anyone else has any burning questions, I think that concludes tonight's Empowering Women with Tech talk with the wonderful Olu. So I want you to give thanks and claps and clicks and whatever you'd like to do in the chat window for the wonderful Olu for giving her time so kindly to us this evening. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Do check out the wonderful work at the BBC. Like I said to everybody, it was, you know, one of the best places I've ever worked with, some of the most amazing people, and I miss them all tremendously. And that says so much about the power of working at the BBC and just how much people cared. And I genuinely hope that the Gillian on there is my old Gillian from the BBC, and if it is, hello and so much love to you. We will be back in 2 weeks, as I said, with the wonderful Kathy Pearl from Google dialing in from California to speak to us all about conversational design. So it's going to be everything about conversational design that you were afraid to ask. Kathy Pearl is an O'Reilly author. She published the O'Reilly book on conversational design, and it is pretty much a guide to what she does at Google with Google Home, what the difference is between a chatbot and a web assistant, Things have evolved very much from Clippy back in the Microsoft days, and it is kind of the future, and it's also a very accessible way as well of communicating a lot of the time as well. So she's going to tell us all about that, and it's a sector that we want to get more inclusion and diversity into. So join us in 2 weeks' time. Our hashtag is #EmpowerWithTech. If you've enjoyed our talk, send us some love on Twitter for us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.